Hi, welcome to valuationpodcast.com, a podcast and video series about all things related to business and valuation. My name is Melissa Gragg, and I'm a financial mediator and valuation expert in St. Louis, Missouri. We're speaking today with Mark Howley about small business success and exit strategies. And his passion is in talking about business, growing business, public speaking. He also has a podcast that we'll talk about later. But today, he's going to share his story about building a business with the exit in mind. And quite frankly, you guys hear me talking about this a lot. Not only how do you grow a business, start a business, and market a business, but if you're not thinking about the end in mind, then I think we get distracted on the pretty logos and all of the fun social media. But quite frankly, there's really a process of starting a business, and then how are you going to exit or monetize it at the end? So welcome, Mark. How are you today?
Well, good. Hello. I hope I helped somebody out there. So anyway, hello, I'm Mark Howley, and I had my own business for 20 years and ultimately sold it. And I think I sold it at a good value. I know I sold it at a good value.
Yeah. Well, and kind of just to get started, because a lot of people, what's happening in the world right now is that people are sort of transitioning from this 9 to 5, or they're seeking sort of outside things. Like, can they offer a service or a product or start a business or become even an influencer or do something on their own? What kind of got you started and initially inspired to start your own business at the beginning?
Well, let's say one thing. I got out of rehab when I was 26, and I have been sober since then. That's not the whole discussion point here. But when I got out, I got a job. And I got a job in selling bags, B-A-G-S, bags, to which my goal was be good at it, like be really good at it. And all of a sudden, I just threw in. I was like, okay, screw all this. All I wanted was a pat on the back. And it so happens that 35 years later, I'm still doing the same thing. And what I learned, and I think is critical, is that I learned for me the various steps to move up in that business and what those different responsibilities encompassed. And the really intense, I believe that anybody who has a passion for something and really starts to look at a product, even if it's a nuts and bolts, you can spend the rest of your life studying it. It's a wildly target business that everything is really cool how detailed it is. So that's I think one of the things that inspired me to start looking at businesses on my own. And what I started to notice was that I guess I love the education of the boss, but he was a micromanager. We used to joke around with, you had to call him before you went to the bathroom. It would just be like, oh my God. And he just pushed down the skill sets of all of us. And he was very dictatorial. So as time went on, I just was like, I got to get out of this somehow. And I looked at, I could go to other places within the industry, but I felt like, well, that's just the same trap. I'm going to become, 50, 55. I'm going to be paid a little more than necessary. Young pups are going to come up and boom, I'm out of there. And I didn't want to get in that trap where I could potentially be the victim of my success. And that really scared me because I watched it. And then it was at that point, I was about 35. Oh no, 25. No, pardon me, early 30s, where for me, after about 7 years in the business, which I think is relatively common, I felt as though I was an asset rather than a worker. And all of a sudden now people want me. And until that age, I'm begging everybody, like, would you like me? Would you like me? And now all of a sudden people are coming up, and it's a rather shocking feeling. The first group of people to come up and say, hey, we'd like you to hire you. There's like this imposter syndrome. Like, really? You want to hire me? And it clicks in your mind. Wow, I know something. I have value. And that's huge. Then you start to realize that. Almost think about a football player. All of a sudden you've broken into the market. Now you think, oh my gosh, I'm a good X or Y, and I can get more money. So that's where it started for me. Then I started to fire up on, well, I don't want to do it for this guy. That's for damn sure. And then I just was lying around in bed all the time with my wife, just bummed out. I got to the point where I thought, every day I give you is a day from my life. You can't give me enough to substitute for what I'm giving you back.
Mhm.
And that just rang so true in my mind. And I had no
Well,
choice.
and I think that people will kind of look at that, you get like 7, 10 years of experience in what you're doing. You have passion around it. You know that you can make more because, like I was in the accounting field and they were charging me out at like $200 an hour and maybe paying me like $30 or $50 an
Yeah,
hour,
yeah, yeah.
so you start to see that arbitrage, but also, there's a passion or there's a reinventing the wheel. Like, right now, things need to be done different. AI, technology, and you start to see like maybe there's a path that could be possible, but your current providers, your current employers are like, no, let's just continue upon what we're doing. And that's sort of gives you this opportunity to, and I think most people think, well, then I'll go buy a business. Like, did you consider buying one or were you considering just starting one at the beginning?
Okay, here's some things I did that I'm going to refer to as dumb. Okay, here I am selling bags, so I'm in Philly, and I'm like, oh my god, I got to do. So there's a guy who's selling a potato chip company, and I'm like, oh, I could buy a potato chip company. So I go run over and I look at it, and I'm like, I don't know potato chips. There's a problem. I like eating them, but I don't know what they are. So then I find another guy who's selling uh, like trail nuts and stuff for inner Philly. So I'm like, oh, I'll buy that one. And I get down there. I'm like, I don't know anything about trail nuts. So then there's another guy who's selling quality control equipment. I loved quality control equipment. I go there. I'm like, oh, cool. Does this standard deviations, all that. And then I go away and I go, I don't know that. I just don't know it. And don't kid yourself. If you buy something, there's nobody, it's not like everybody goes, hey, hi, Mark, welcome to my market. No, the first thing they're going to do is kill you before you even get in it.
Mm-hmm.
They'll drop prices. They'll do all sorts of stuff, get you out of here.
Mm-hmm.
So I started realizing, well, no, I got to get in somewhere where I can fight, to which that's packaging.
Mm-hmm.
At which time I started writing business plans. And I had been to Asia quite a bit. Behind my boss's back on my vacations, I had been going to Korea, Taiwan, and China looking for sourcing. I would say, oh, I'm going away on vacation. And he'd be like, oh, where are you going to go? Oh, I'm going up on the top of a mountain. My phone won't work. And, so I would then just poof, I'd take off to Asia. And I wanted to learn more and more and more about the business. And then when I got to a certain point, I started sending out letters to those guys with a business plan. And I would say, hey, if you give me $500,000, I'll start your business over here. And they all said no. We'll let you have an exclusive, but we're not giving you any money. So that was kind of a cold smack in the face that, wow, I'm now all of a sudden, I think I'm valuable. And then I realize I'm not valuable. Yeah. So it's like this flip. And then I'm thinking, okay, I got to come up with a new strategy, to which then I started sending business plans to people within my industry, within packaging. And that's when I started to get some traction. I was looking for smaller businesses that looked like they were kind of tiny, maybe a little rickety. And I wanted to get into one that I could, my sweat equity, like they call it, would bring serious benefit. So that's where I came to. Then I quit my job. I had 3 kids. I had to cut my pay by about 40%. And I kept my wife.
Well, and that does cover some of like the how do you prepare, because you're discontent, like you have this discontent in your current situation. You've looked at some of these businesses, and again, you can go out and buy franchises. You could buy, little businesses that need some help and you're working on them. But if you don't have a passion for it or an understanding of the industry, you're really coming in and hoping that the cash flow creates something so that you can continue. And in these creating these business plans, what other things did you do to prepare to know that packaging was the right place to be, to figure out, like, could you partner with somebody? Could you come into a firm? Did you have to start your own firm? Did you have to start pulling from savings? Because I don't think people realize some of this bootstrapping is what's necessary at the beginning of starting any business, whether you buy it or, start it from a fresh idea, right?
Yeah, my first take would be the vast majority of companies fail because they don't have money. So I would say don't use credit cards. That's dumb. I would say if it's available to you, where are you going to get your money? So to me, basically, I almost cut my income in half. So then what's that mean? I'm not going to live as fancy. Oh, I want the new Ford Bronco. Nope. You're going to get the crappy Subaru. You're going to have to budget your life out. At that time I had 3 children. I was trying to get my wife to budget out how many diapers would you use a day? Right. So I'd be like one of the daughters would be a little bit wet in the diaper. And I'd be like, don't worry, we can wait a few hours. And she's like, get the hell out of here. Cause I honestly, what I'm joking about is I had my life down to, effectively a P&L. I'm bringing in 70,000. Can this thing make any money? The answer was 0, but it could carry me.
Okay.
So that's where I stayed for probably 4 years.
Well, and when you built the business, there's going to be overhead. There's going to be high expenses. Like, even if you start now, we talk a lot about marketing because it's kind of a passion, but do you have a website? Do you have any, marketing materials? Do you have any business cards? Do you have, are you going to go door to door and email marketing, or, how do you start to kind of really do the work? And quite frankly, I don't think people realize being an entrepreneur is not a 9 to 5. It's like a 9 to 9. It's like a 24/7 kind of situation.
You breathe, as hard as you try, you can't turn your brain off. You just can't. And the saying is, if you want to start your own business, there's really no good reason. It's because you can't not. That but what are you going to have? I don't want a boss. Oh, you're going to have a boss. You will. Don't worry. I don't want to work a lot of hours. Oh, you're going to work a lot of hours. I'm not going to have any headaches. Oh, you're going to have headaches. I'm going to make a bunch of money. You're not going to make a bunch of money right away. So there you are. The only reason you would do it is because you truly think there is nothing else you can do, and you're willing to jump. But don't jump into something that you don't know. That's a shit plan. That's a shit plan. Pardon my language, but that's what it is.
Yeah.
So to me, I was able and took a lot of digging to find a company that was in my market, but was marketed poorly. They had a product that didn't work properly, and they had a crappy group of managers. And they had been bought, unbeknownst to me, by a small investment firm. I did not know that they were such a rickety ship. I should have known it, but I was young. I didn't care. And I just grabbed it. And I moved it from Philly to Seattle thinking, I'm going to learn everything, and got there, and holy crap, was I, out of whack. So then your question becomes, I think, how did you prepare and your overhead? Well, first off, what I realized is we could sell coffee bags and that's it. That's it. The original people were saying, we can sell trash bags. We can sell fruit. No. You walk down the aisle. If you pick up a potato chip bag, you're never going to get it. That's because I knew the market. I knew the pricing. Cheese, you're not going to get it. If a sales rep comes into me and says, I got a great cheese lead, I say, no, it's not a lead. That's just somebody wasting your time. That's a time bandit. Get them off the phone. And that's hard. That's a very hard discipline, because one of the things you are inclined to do is to say, I'm going to get a salesman for that. Because everybody says you're going to get, I'm going to get it. No, you're not. You don't know the market. And in our business, somebody says, let's search for a green field, whatever the hell they call that now. No, we didn't have a green field. We had a field full with animals, dogs, cats, cows, everything all over. So you had to go right where you're supposed to be good. And additionally with that is everybody wants a goddamn hat They want a pen, they want, oh, we want a logo. Go out and get the greatest design person. Oh my Lord. Ambos, we got to go to 50 trade shows. Why? Because everybody wants to get on a plane and fly around and drink beer and have fun and just piss your money away. Well, no, we're not going to do that. We refined the website with we got a design person. We didn't just go whip on our own. We changed some of our, quite a bit of our literature to become, we want to become what I refer to as utilitarian, but not cheap. So we didn't want to look like the real big company. We wanted to look like the guy right in the middle. We're kind of personalized, but we're professional. So that was our target. I think that generally answers your question. Then you're not hiring new people. You hire when it's absolutely necessary. I actually said to a couple of my managers, we can hire another person if you'd like, or if you're willing to work harder, I'll distribute that money to you.
Right.
Now that'll change, but that means you're gonna have to work more. And then when that's going to pop, then everybody realizes we got to have somebody. And that's when okay, let's bring somebody on.
Well, and one of the things that you said at the very beginning was that you saw opportunities, you saw where there were weaknesses in the company that you could kind of exploit and maybe make more money, but you also had to kind of make it leaner and meaner and really focused on. And I think that, a lot of people will talk about finding your niche and finding your area. And, even in the valuation community, you can't be everything to everyone. Although at the beginning, when that phone call comes in and they're like, hey, can you value, this Maserati? And I'll be like, well, no, I don't really value cars. But they're like, well, can't you do something? I think you have this thought like, well, I need the money and I'm just going to go do this. As opposed to, these are the things that what you're saying is these are the things I'm good at. And quite frankly, I shouldn't really bother with trying to sell these other types of services to all of these people, right?
No, you don't know what you don't know. And really what you do know, you might know. So there's kind of like this catch-22 a little bit. So what are you playing? Like a lot of business, you're playing a hunch, but you have an educated hunch. And you first off, I cut my business from 40 people to 30 people within 6 months of being there. Some people say, oh, that's cruel. No. The tree's going to die, right? It's going to die. The only way to keep it alive is to chop a whole bunch of the wings off the branches off and start over. Then I can make 30 people live. And then we ended up doubling, almost tripling those employees. But man, you got a bunch of people. We had people doing like pricing strategies at a horizontal, vertical level. Like, what? We're selling bags. Yeah, I don't need that. What we do is we had $4 million of bags on the shop floor, right? And then we sold. So just boom, 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 Amazon. And then probably another 60% of our business was they send me designs and I put fancy stuff on it, whatever they say. So that was it. And it just, by luck of the draw, the market was there for coffee, specialty coffee. We wanted, like, if you go out to the hippest coffee shop where the most snobby coffee guy is sitting there, with the hair and the earrings, and he's telling you, oh, you should have this. That's my customer. That's my customer. So that's it. And just stay put. And that's if you find a niche, narrow, and that's what we did. And thankfully it was there.
And everything, everything that when we're working with or consulting with companies, we're like, what is your ideal consumer? What is your ideal customer? Like, talk to them, create based on them, and really start to figure out what do they need. But you get to the point where you're doing, like you start the business, now some money's coming in, but as soon as the money comes in, it's almost like we need to figure out, we need more people, we need more this, we need more, I think that a lot of people get to this place where, can I hire somebody to do, the marketing? Can I hire an accountant? Do I need a salesperson? How do you decide to scale when the money isn't necessarily just funneling in to be able to do these things, right?
Well, that's again, you're playing hunches and you're playing business. You make all your decisions, business, business, business. You get an accounting, blah, 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 and then it comes down to the end. And if you're terribly cautious, your hunch is caution, which is fine if you want to be conservative. But you want to grow a business, you say, okay, no, my hunch is I can put that extra $150,000 on it, and I'm going to get $500,000 back in a couple of years. But in my opinion, the most important thing is if you're going to bring somebody in, teach them roughly what you're doing and back away. Don't micromanage. You will know if you don't micromanage, you will know the good ones like that, and you'll know the bad ones like that. You step back. Okay, you may screw something up. Maybe it'll cost you $50,000. I don't know what it is, but that's how you know. You run around and micromanage people. What are you really saying to them? I don't trust you.
Mm-hmm.
You're not smart. That would really, that takes away their dignity. Don't do that. Mm-hmm. So if you're going to scale, get people, train them, and step back. And that's what I did. And I think if you read most business management books now, that's what you will hear. Scale, get away. And I'd say the other thing is for a small business is create your business like a big one. You're the president. You got a line coming across here. You got A, B, C, various skills. Bring them down like that. And a small business, it's always kind of crossing over. But you have if somebody would say, how do you run your business? You could put up an org chart and say there. What do you do if an order comes in? Oh, it goes from A to B to C. They'll say process flow. Okay, process flow. No, sit down and write it down with a few people and try to make it just simple. Mm-hmm. And then it'll get screw up, then refine it. But I don't know. That's all. I'm not that smart. I just knew how to make money.
Right.
And that, whatever.
So if you're starting at like the bootstrapping place, right? And you're like just working like a dog and it's starting to hit, right? People are coming to you. Obviously they see that you're doing it uniquely different or better or whatever it is, better pricing, better product, whatever it is. At what point did your vision start to change that you now had enough money coming in that maybe you could make grander vision, like now you're not trying to just pay the bills and keep the lights on, right? Now you have to see forward into the future and have a new vision. How did that change, or was it just kind of a gradual process? And what kind of advice do you have when people are in this kind of, I don't know, abyss, if you will?
Yeah, you're in an abyss, but I used to joke around. I still say the same. I was chasing something. I didn't know what the hell I was chasing. And then I started smelling some gasoline. And I'm like, oh, there's like a bus out there.
Mm-hmm.
And like, oh. So I'm just sprinting towards something, but I kind of know what it is. And I knew it was in packaging. I knew I didn't quite think of myself as selling it. And then I get up close enough, I could see the bus. Now, all of a sudden, my vision starts to change. And I think, wow, that's a big bus. I'd like to get on it. So then you run up and now you jump on it. Okay, now you're steering it. Now there's people running behind you, but you're the one on the bus. And you start saying to yourself, how does this vision change? Well, all of a sudden, for me, the first vision was I could become wealthy. Like all of a sudden, I just thought I would sell bags all my life. I just thought, this is what I'm going to do. And then lo and behold, you're sitting there and you're like, whoa, this thing, I can make money, and it's a rather, that in itself is now. And for quite some time, I thought, I'm just going to remain a small business. I'm going to love what I do. And then I started thinking, wait a minute, what's this thing worth? And just out of curiosity, because if I'm going to do dividends, which I was doing, I'm thinking, wait a minute. What? And I used to think, what are the property values around? Like I thought, when I'm buying a house, I go into the property and I say, yeah, what are all the houses worth? So I started digging in and saying, here's what I did. I bought shares in all of the bigger companies in my market so I could get their K1s or whatever the hell it's called. And then I would just basically walk down and see, am I online with what their profit line is versus mine. Like, is my overhead out of whack? And what I was trying to figure out was, am I, like you said, is my overhead loaded up? I'm thinking, and it so happened I was. And I'm like, oh, so my, like I said, like street kid Mark kind of figured it out. And I had friends, don't get me wrong. One of my brothers is a Harvard MBA. So I think anybody like you provide a service. And from what I understand, a great one of the best in the world. In fact, the best in the world, as I understand. But anyway, grab those people. They know shit. They didn't get where they are because they're just out there being like, oh, I'm smart Harvard guy. No, they went to Harvard because they're smart. So that's when I really started honing in on, wow. So now I got to think of this a little bit different. Whew. And then you flip into almost a different person.
Well, and I think it's interesting because if you're looking at your competitors or you're looking at the industry and understanding where their profitability is, that's kind of the first step of understanding what the value would be at the exit. And, like what other things did you do to try to figure out what could be your potential value? Because like value and sales or selling your company is just one piece of the puzzle. Like if you're comparing yourself to competitors, do I have a better team? Do I have leadership? Do I have a better product? Am I customer service? Like it's really a full package that somebody's going to buy if they come and buy your company. And so
they're not buying me.
Right.
They're buying a thing. Right. And you may be the leading thing. Like somebody comes and meet you. Oh, you are the passion. Okay, fine. But I don't want to stick around. Right. No. I'm not sticking around working. For me, it was a little bit different. I'm like, I'm not working for you big pile of people. I'll just go around and start assassinating people. I'm off the charts. So what I did was, one thing is I looked up kind of what's my value. They did first EBITDA, and then I called one broker guy and said, and he tried to make me get all involved with him. That wasn't why I was calling him. I was just trying to pick his brain. Then I went out and started saying to some of the smaller people in my market, hey, what if I bought you? Some of the little chicken poops around there. And I would go in, I'd say, one guy back east, I'm like, hey man, why don't you sell me your business? And he sends me this stuff. First, a horrible, you couldn't figure out what his value was. And then he tells me, oh, I think I'm worth $9 million. I look at it and go, what? You're worth like 2. Then I tried another one. And so all of a sudden I'm realizing something's out of whack here. So how do I assess my real value? And when I run, they're all one-man shops. So the most important thing for me was, you got to have a team of people. I had a sales guy, a guy who was vice president of sales, CFO, head of quality control, head of customer service. So now you have the structure sitting there. And if they're good at what they do, when somebody comes in to buy you, you say, oh, go talk to that guy. Go talk to that guy. And they're not saying, oh, we have to talk to Mark. We have to talk to Mark. We have to talk to Mark. That's critical. That is, I think, more value, brings you more value than anything else you have. You could say, oh, I'm quality control and I'm great work. Well, a lot of people are that,
right.
But who's a structure? And that we were a structure.
Well, and I think when we talk about it for a sales process, if you have buyers coming in to look at your company, if you are the biggest piece of the puzzle and you are exiting, that means you don't want to work for 5 years. You might want to work for 1 year or 6 months, or, have this perception that you could just exit immediately, when the reality is you get into this space of entrepreneurship, you have to replace yourself. You have to hire the people that do the things that you do. And so you can go on, like we like to say, could you go for a 4-week vacation with no contact with your office? And could they survive? And if they can't survive, how bad are they going to mess things up? Like what's going to happen? Is your revenue going to decline? Is your profitability going to decline? Do you know like, I mean, I can barely get away for a day. So obviously I haven't built that very well, but that would be where you're trying to build in those levels of, the management team, because an outside buyer is looking at, can I run this, literally extracting the owner? Is it still going to run? Because if it won't, I'm going to discount your price. I'm
Of
not going to
course,
pay a
you're
high
just going
price.
to say, because he's going to leave.
Yeah.
You're a guy who's driven and you hit a pile of money. Now let's tell me what to do. What do I say? No. I don't have to anymore. Well, if you don't do that, you're going to get fired. All right, fire me. You just
Mhm.
don't care anymore. So the thing that I structured up front, I said this, the only people, you're buying me all or none. That's it. I had the benefit of not having to sell. I was making money. So
Right.
I just said, well, look, all or none, because some of the people want to do these things that are called buybacks, or they keep, so you are strapped to this thing for 3 years, and you're strapped to it, but you're tied into them performing. So now you got all these corporate guys saying, oh, it should go like this. Well, you're sitting there going, wait a minute, that's my $5 million sitting there. So some people have to do that. I'm not saying that's wrong, but I wasn't going to do that. Give me my money. If it's a little less money, fine. But when I'm done, I'm out. I'll help you. They gave me a 2-year deal, contract, good, all these things that would make it great if I left, but they wanted me there for 2 years. My guys could do it. I knew it.
Well, and as we talk about this, because you kind of, like, it sort of goes to one of the questions, but realistically, like, what happened in the sale? Like, when you went to go to market to sell your company, did you choose to go to market, or did a buyer appear, or what was the process?
They came to me.
Yeah.
They came to
Okay.
me. I had a lot of people calling me. And if you're a small business, here's one thing I would advise. If a broker calls you and says, do you want to sell your business? Say no. If you say nothing else, they're after you. They'll start diving at you. So I just learned, I got them all the time. Nope. No, done. I didn't want to sell through a broker because I just figure they're going to take my money. They're going to say they're the kingpin, and now they kind of control me. I'm base. They pull me. I was lucky enough to have somebody contact me, and the coolest thing about that was just about like getting a job when you're 35. They were giving me a better value than I had estimated. So when they gave me a number, I think it was the best negotiating thing I ever did. They gave me a number over lunch, and I remember going, What do you think about that? And in my mind, I'm going, holy moly. But then there's this thing where I don't want to leave my company. And ultimately, what my wife was like, listen, we moved across the country. We don't know the life we left behind. It would be truly, between you and I, not wrong, but it would be irresponsible. Because remember, small businesses can go away like that.
Right.
My business, boom.
Right.
One little thing.
Like, I don't, like, and I love that you're talking about this, because the majority of my clients, or not majority, but a lot of our strategic clients, are doing valuations each year, right? So they have an idea of what their value is. And the reason why we've been doing that is because we've seen in the last 5 years, kind of post-pandemic, that buyers are going directly to, so you're going to get that call, and you're going to get a call from like a CEO that you might know, or a company that you might know. And if you're not prepared for that, to say, oh, yeah, let me think about that, or position it, even if they call and say an amazing number, you almost at the very jump kind of mess up the deal, right?
First off, are you going to be able to survive due diligence? They're going to come in and they are going to climb up your butt. You are going to, it's going to be 6 months and you are going to be working all day. They call it deal fatigue. And, you will get, literally, when they come in. Now, I was lucky. I did this. I had a review every year of a bank review of my, because I borrowed money. They made me do it. So when somebody came to buy me, it was like, listen, You do your due diligence. And by the way, due diligence means you said it was worth $100. They come in and they go, no, it's worth 80 because you screwed up. You know, you didn't tell me that you had, you didn't tell me you had 800,000 baseball caps in your warehouse, so they say, no, we're not going to do that. And then they just basically say, but my due diligence was there. And when they said, we're going to come in and do diligence, I said, okay, guys, there's nothing wrong. There is nothing wrong. And if you try and find it, I was fortunate. I didn't have to sell it. I said, I'll just walk.
Yeah.
I'll walk. I don't need it. It's an aggravation. I have 5 girls, which nobody knows right now. I have, I got more than I thought I would get. Leave.
Yeah.
Now, many people aren't in that position, but thankfully I was. And that was by, I think, I'd say a little bit hard work and some luck.
Well, but that's the only, like in this negotiation process, because a lot of times the business owner will call us and say, hey, somebody called me and wants to offer me money. What should I do? How should I negotiate it? And what should I look at? And that's where we come in, because again, a lot of times you're going to negotiate yourself into a dark hole that you can't get out of. But realistically, what you're looking at is how do you position up the company in a way that you're providing the information, you're going after the value that you want. And the only way to play the best poker is to not bluff, is to be like, no, I'm successful. I don't need to sell now. I could if the offer is right, but let me get somebody involved, like let me call Melissa and talk to Melissa, provide the information.
Who else would you call? Melissa?
Right.
Who else would you call? So, I mean, come on.
Well, and that, like in some capacity, I think that, because we're probably going to have you on another podcast as well to talk about more details. But this is a great conversation because I think people don't understand that the sale process is like a second job. And
pardon me. If you don't have some smart people, you're screwed. I'm telling you, I would have been dust without a good attorney. I mean, a real one, not Harry down the street who does 80 goddamn things. He does wills. He does, no. We want to get, my advice is go get some expensive law firm, because if you're going to get in a boxing match, right, you don't want the guy in the corner nobody knows. You want the dude coming out who's like, yeah, I'm a, and if you want to get somebody who's valuing your business, when the fight gets down, you want to bring somebody, and there will, not, I mean, fights is a metaphor, but I mean, there are going to be things that go down that will knock you off your socks. If you're just a guy like me, who's, I'm the back of the napkin guy, Yeah. So I got to get $1 million. How'd you figure that out? Here.
Yeah. And even there are techniques that we're even working with to tell them the number, to say, you know what, this is the value, this is the offer, this is the deal that we're taking. And I like your advice on the attorney. A lot of times what I don't think people understand is if a buyer comes in, the odds are it's not the first time they've bought something. It could be, but odds are they've already done this process if they're kind of coming for you. So if you're hiring an expensive attorney, you have to understand that probably in the deal, we're going to have the buyer write the contract. So they're going to have the majority of the expenses in writing the contract, because we can't guess at how they want to buy this company. But your attorney is going to review that contract. And so they need to have a depth of knowledge, because you're not going to maybe pay them to do a whole bunch of work. But the work that they're going to do, they need to know it. They need to be a transaction attorney that understands at a minimum the different type of deal structures, and then the kind of the other stuff, the reps and warranties. What's the holdback?
There's one. I'm glad you brought up reps and warranties, because I remember my attorney saying to me, as you can tell, I'm a fast thinker. And one time he said, Mark, and I'm like, what? And he goes, we're going to spend tomorrow all morning, and we're going to work on reps and warranties. That's what we're doing. And for anybody who doesn't know, that means I represent that my house won't fall down tomorrow because I didn't tell you that the plumbing was a mess. Okay, you got to say that. Okay. Right. And if something, whatever it may be, I warranty that I did not lie. I mean, we were fortunate, and this was truly fortunate. The largest client I had of 2000 was 8% of our sales a year. Now that is unusual. So if they put a bullet in that 8% guy's head, it wouldn't be, or woman, I hate the bullets, a little mean, but anyway, I'm from back east. We think bullets in the head, but anyway,
right.
the bottom line is you if you have that larger client, how are you going to justify that? How are you going to provide some sort of a representation or warranty that if that guy goes away, I have some way of filling that?
Mm-hmm.
And if you lie about that, they're going to take your money. They're going to come back and get your money.
Yeah.
Because you lied. It's not that hard to figure out,
And attached to that is typically a monetary amount. So if you're selling your company for $1 million, they might say, to kind of protect the reps and warranties, we want a holdback. We want something in escrow for a year. And that could be 200,000 of the deal. Now you're thinking you're getting all this money up front and you have to wait for that in the future.
Let me break in there. In the spirit of time, we could go down this rabbit hole a long way, and if you care to and go longer, I can, but I don't know whether your audience wants to stick around that long. That you tell me. I mean, I could go on for another 20 minutes if you want to, but you and I spoke. I'm happy to, but it's your show.
But I think just in general, and maybe that is like, maybe we need to have an entire about deal concepts, but there's a retrade. Like, let's just at least simply talk about the retrade at the end. That's what I term it. But at the end, like, you're so excited, you got this deal, you're getting $1 million, you've agreed to everything. And then weeks, a month or less before the deal is supposed to close, they're like, we found a few little sticky ickies in your financials, and I think we're only going to offer you 800,000 instead of.
You're already bought in. You're like, oh, I want to. It's like buying a house. You're like, I'm only going to spend 800. Then they show you the 900s, and you go, ooh, that extra bathroom. It's the same thing with buying a business. They'll bring you down. And the other thing I've always said with negotiating, if you don't have a lawyer, it's not what they say, it's what they don't say. Mm-hmm. And what they'll play with you is, oh, we just thought that was, you understood that. And you're like, no, and a lawyer will either quickly or immediately pick that up. And that, it's not what they do say. I always think these are smart people who are buying from you. Mm-hmm. And they're trying to find, as best they can, a way. And maybe it's true that they thought you knew it, but it really doesn't matter. Yeah. You didn't think you knew it.
And even going in, you should expect, like, are you happy with the $1 million? Are you happy with a 20% cut? Because you also have to deal with taxes. You also have to deal with all of these other little things of, oh, I'm keeping my accounts receivable, but what if people don't pay? Oh, I still have to pay.
That's a great one. I love that. You hold accounts receivable. What? Right. That's, in case anybody doesn't know, that means within the next 30 to 60 days, who's going to give me my money? Right. And you say, am I getting 80% or 90%? And we could talk about this later, the way banks look at that, the value of that. Because let's say they gave it to you. You'd be like, whoa, Harry's a bum. He's not going to give me, and, there's little formulas that you can go through that, make it that you don't. My experience is, I don't want the receivables. You buy it lock, stock, and barrel, because what the hell? How about this? I'll take the receivables. You take the payables. How's that? And just
and I think going into this again, like, we started this whole conversation with start your business with the end in mind. And quite frankly, you need to know some of these things are going to happen so that they don't surprise you at the end. Because what's going to happen? They're going to ding you that 20% and you're already too far in. You're no longer at that stage where you're like, well, I can sell or I cannot. I'm making money. No, now you're like, okay, we almost got married and now you're you need a prenup. You're changing the whole game.
Plus, think about this. Everybody in the company knows, no matter how quiet you keep it.
Yes.
They all know. So they're all thinking, I'm out of here because the next company's coming along. Your competitors are going to know, and they're going to use it against you. They're going to say, oh, did you hear Harry's selling out? You better worry about that. Who knows? He may start selling buckets now. He doesn't do bags. And, they're going to do everything. So the longer you stay out there, like a house, the longer you stay out on the market, the lower the price is going to be. Think, I always say somebody in business, think just kind of like practical. All the other shit is not, that'll get figured out. Just think like, I want money. It's that's what it's all about. Don't worry about the zeros. Don't be offended if somebody does something wrong. It's all about the money. And once you kind of accept that, it actually becomes easier.
Yeah. And a lot of times what we're doing is again, we got the high price attorney, but they're just reviewing things as they come in. We usually have somebody like me that's negotiating the deal and providing the financial. In that situation, a lot of times, if you don't have a broker, no one's going to pressure you to do that deal. Like if the deal is bad, you're going to walk away. Even if you are out $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 for some of those pieces, those consultants, the reality is you're going to be a lot better to sell in the future if you come out of that deal and wait for the next opportunity than if you just go into it, because that's a red flag. And if you see any red flags in the deal process, I would say those red flags are going to get huge after you then now combine and get married to that new buyer, because you're staying on for 6 months or a year. Or if you have an earnout, like when accounting firms buy each other, there's a 3-year earnout.
Yeah.
So no one's doing anything for 3 years, right? And you're going to be married and you're not making the rules anymore. You are now are working.
I said they want my I hold back $3 million, and then 80,000 knuckleheads come in. Hey Mark, do you know the international strategy for selling your bags in Europe? No, I don't go to Europe. You know how to sell in Japan? No, look at me, I'm not Japanese. So I agree, but sometimes you just have to.
Yeah.
That's not. I was fortunate.
Absolutely. If you know it going into it, that's why we're kind of having this discussion, because again, an earnout, everybody's like, well, I have an earnout of, $3 million over 3 years. Every single dollar of that earnout, you are going to fight for. And if it's predicated on profit, because we usually have it predicated on revenue. Profit, but if you go down to EBITDA, you're going to be arguing about what the EBITDA is or whether it was profitable. And for the most part, in an acquisition, you're not going to be as profitable as you were in the past. You have extra expenses, complications. Yeah, everybody's got a new culture.
They're going to go out and buy a bunch of baseball hats and make a prettier website, and then they're going to get a new salesperson. And you're like, whoa, I don't need that guy. And, all of a sudden, slowly, that little overhead you're watching. And I might add this, as you were discussing with me. Many people don't know what an EBITDA is. And if I were working with somebody like Melissa, I would fast find out. If you're a small business out there, know what an EBITDA is. It is not some big confusing thing. It sounds fancy, but if you get somebody who's practical, it will not be a problem. It will not be a problem. So you just have to learn it.
Absolutely. Well, let's kind of finish this off with a question that I think would be interesting to cap it off is, what were some of the setbacks or things that turned out to be more valuable learning experiences in your particular deal? And we don't even know a lot about your deal just yet, because we'll probably talk about it in a future podcast. But like, what would you look back and say, you know what, if I would have known that was going to happen, I would have done a few things differently while I ran the business or while I was operating it. Can you think of anything that would be really kind of a learning experience that was a little painful or you wouldn't want to do again, but it could help our viewers?
Yeah. Number one, does the guy who's going to buy it, or woman, do they have the money, or are they running out and trying to get the money? That's where I got a little bit caught behind the 8 ball. That doesn't mean it's bad that that's the case. But imagine somebody comes into you and says, hey, I'll give you $100. And you're like, oh, great. So we're going to do the deal. And then you get 30 days beforehand and they say, we only were able to get $70 because they're going out to get it.
Right.
Now, if they have that pile of money sitting with them, or that you feel comfortable they can get it. That's what I learned, because I had one group just pull out on me. 60 days before it, they just pull out. We don't have the money. And it's like closing a house. You know, we can't do it. And you're like, oh my God, that's the thing I learned.
Yeah.
Biggest.
Well, and I think that goes towards, if you're working with an advisor, that you're qualifying the buyers, you're making sure that you're not engaging. Mark, tell them a little bit about how they can reach out to you if they've enjoyed what they've learned. You have your own podcast as well. You do public speaking engagements, and you also offer mentorship to other entrepreneurs. This is the website that they can join. But what should, if somebody wants to reach out to you, is that something that you kind of talk to people or work with them in some capacity?
Well, number one, I get a complete buzz out of public speaking. If you think I'm a little like this, I'm very story driven, practical story driven. And I think I have a good message just about the things I talked about here, passion, the use of people, and persevering and keeping a focus on things. I know I'm very good at giving that talk, and I've done it. When it comes to mentoring, I want to sell the two things, my show and what's happened is a lot of young men have come to me unsolicited, first off, and wanted my help. Then as I started to do my podcast, I started to find business people. So really, it's kind of like a business. It started kind of like, oh gosh, maybe I do have a target. And that, interestingly enough, that wasn't my immediate, I didn't plan on doing that, but now I'm like, wow, it's, you have that little bit of an imposter syndrome, like, oh, really? Oh, you want to talk to me? And then you realize I have value. And, much like, and I'll just conclude with this, much like Melissa has value. And and I do. I've spoken to you before, and I think you're intelligent, competent woman.
Yeah.
And I would say that comfortably.
I appreciate that. Well, if they want to reach out to you, all of your contact information is at themarkhowleyshow.com. And we're probably going to have you come on again to talk about a little bit more of the details, because I think that people really want to know what happens in that transaction, and maybe not always from the advisors, because the advisors are going to be like, you need to be prepared. And people are like, yeah. That seems like a lot of lip service. But when you hear it from somebody who's gone through it, there really are things that you should be aware of and be prepared for, so that you're not struggling through the sales process and kind of getting a bad result at the end, right?
Well, as long as nobody out there minds me being blunt and maybe a touch of extra Philly in there, I'm not always Mr. Polite, but I am giving a very good message. I'm not a bad guy. I just sometimes get a little, I don't know.
No, it was great. Well, we appreciate you, and we will look forward to talking to you again. And thank you so much for your time today.
You're very welcome.